This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I have with me here Tom Easton and Frank Wu. And Tom has been a writer for a long time, and he's written many books and short stories and essays and all kinds of things. And Frank has been an artist for a while. He's won some Hugo Awards, and he has decided to start doing some writing. And as you can see by Frank's hat, that
I have a book hat.
yes, he has a book hat, that Tom and Frank have decided to write a book together called Espionage or ESPionage, uh, regime change. So my first question to you guys is, what made you decide to write together?
We live half a mile apart. We got together first in a group called Hal's Pals, which was founded and hosted by the late Hal Clement, or Harry Stubbs. And the first people that were part of that group were a number of Hal's pals. And eventually, when Hal died, they said, "Tom, why don't you take over being our mentor?" And I said, "Oh my, okay." And we had some meetings, and the group has pretty much faded away over the last few years. But still, that's where I met Frank. And we muttered a few words about possibly collaborating one of these days. And then I showed him something that eventually became the first part of this novel. And he said, "Oh, yes, we can work together." And away we went. It's been good. I have a tendency to write as if everything's a short story, meaning everything is concise and compact. And to get a novel, even a short one like this, you've really got to fill in an awful lot of the blanks, flesh it out, add what Frank calls his magic sauce.
I call it. I prefer to think of it as set decorations, because a lot of people tend to write as sort of a disembodied voice in a black room, and it's like, well, is there something important happening in the room? Like, what do these people look like? And actually, Tom's actually good at description. Tom gets credit for this really clever title. The whole thing of just capitalizing the first three letters, and suddenly it's psychic spies.
That is
That was your
true.
right.
Which is just brilliant. And I mean, like, yeah, that's just great.
Okay, so now can one of you, Tom, can you tell me what's this book about?
Headlines. I have been, over the last few years, doing an awful lot of my writing in reaction to headlines. And in this particular case, the headlines have an awful lot to do with Russia's war on the West. They are, at the moment, they are trying to recreate or create the Third Empire. The first empire was the Tsars, the second one was the Commissars, and now we have the oligarchs. They want Alaska back, they have said. They want all of the ex-Iron Curtain countries back. They want Sweden. They want Finland. I don't think they're going to stop if they get those. So we have basically revived an old CIA thing. Back in the late 70s, the CIA was recruiting psychics to be spies. Of course, it was bunk, but we supposed, well, what if it wasn't? What would those old farts like me be doing now? And we came up with a number of ideas that worked as psychics, and then we collided them with the headlines. And we haven't finished the collision yet. We're working on 2 sequels.
Oh,
Frank is right in the throes of number 2 right now, and I'm finishing a nice long draft of number 3.
I mean,
excellent.
the thing is, like, the world is terrifying right now. I mean, we got Donald Trump doing all sorts of crazy things. You got Russians who, like, as Tom said, they're trying to build a third empire. And it's like between the empires, like Russia is always going through this sort of expansion and contraction. So at the end of the Cold War, when Germany was reunited and the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union broke apart, I was like, yeah, we won. But really, we should have been wary of the wars to put it all back together, because
They
that's what
don't.
Russia does historically. They like they have somebody like Ivan the Terrible who conquers all these surrounding lands, and then the people who follow like lose those, and then someone else comes along and says like, "Hey, we should get those lands back." And every time someone does that, they rebuild the army. Hundreds of thousands of people die in horrible ways, and the whole world just kind of shakes and quivers. And that's what we see now. We saw like
Mhm.
Putin grab back Chechnya and Georgia and Crimea, and like nobody really cared that much, but we should have cared. We should have been like,
Right.
that's just the next thing. And after Ukraine, no matter how it goes, win, lose, or draw, like it's just a matter of time before they march into someplace else. And as Tom mentioned, even in Alaska, they've been talking about like, well, the United States didn't really get Alaska back right, and our didn't get Alaska right from us the first time, and we need to get it back. That's what I meant. And yeah, it's just awful and terrifying. And
Mhm.
like, hey, yeah, let's have some fun. Let's mix in some horror. We'll take all the horrible, scary stuff, and we'll mix in some fun psychic mind reading. And we got mind readers, we got fire starters, we got pyro, we got telekinetics, we got people that fight using 60s and 1970s rock and roll for their theme. We got all sorts. We got codes. We got guns hidden in cameras and secret codes and all sorts of fun stuff like that. And to balance out like the coming like horrors and terrors
So
of war.
One of the things that the very first review said was that we're doing fantasy with the net up.
Yeah.
The psychic powers that we give these characters are very, very limited, for instance.
Mhm.
Our principal character, for instance, can read a mind maybe 6 feet away across a table.
Mhm.
If you think when you retire that you're going to make yourself rich by playing poker, you're going to get taken out in the back alley and shot as soon as you're obviously far too lucky. But if you ride the commuter train into the financial district and read stock tips out of people's minds in the next seat, you should be able to do awfully well. I wish I could do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
That
that'd be
is
nice.
true. So,
Uh,
so the inspiration for this novel was the things that are going on nowadays in with Russia, right?
With Russia,
And
we renamed our political parties. Russia is cooperating tremendously with the members of the Truther Party,
yeah, I
who are,
wonder which side that really represents.
yeah, they are all very willing dupes. Um, the novel is frankly political.
yes.
It's psychics, but it's political, and it's current events. We've
Mhm.
had readers comment on how topical it is.
Yes, I would imagine. So, how much research, actual research, went into this book?
Oh, a lot. Well, I don't know how
I
much
would
research Tom
imagine.
did. I did a lot.
I'm old enough, I just have to remember when. The business with the psychics, the CIA, and a little
Spoon
bit of a
benders.
family connection because my father once worked for the CIA, and when I was a child, we lived in France running a safe house. Um, you do some research to flesh out some details. And of course, when you start looking into the Russian history and so forth and so on, your starting point is just the headlines. What is
Mhm.
going on here? And you look a little deeper and you look a little deeper, and it's not hard to find enough to tell the story. It really isn't, especially with the internet.
Mhm.
And if we're not
Well,
supposed to trust everything we read on the internet, we just tell people, well, hey, come on, it's fiction.
maybe Tom knew all that stuff already, but I actually had to do it. No, I mean, like, if you're gonna do stuff with psychics and mind readers, you have to think about like what have people done before and how can I make this different? And one of the cool things that I mean, Tom was talking about like this is science fiction with a net. We're not just I mean, we are kind of making stuff up, but we're not just making stuff up. We're just kind of making stuff up, if you know what I mean. And so one of the issues with telekinetics is Tom, do you want to talk about this?
Well, one of the things I did before we even got started on this was I played around with one of the difficulties with telekinesis. And I wound up with a short piece that appeared in Nature Futures. The title was Work, Energy, Heat. The idea being that if you do work, you have to use energy. And if you use energy, you generate waste heat. If you do enough work, you generate a fair amount of heat. A telekinetic trying to move anything more than a couple of grams is going to be building up heat in a portion of the brain that's involved in doing this. If you do too much work, you fry your brain.
Ooh.
That's the laws of thermodynamics.
Yeah. And
And
so yeah. Go ahead, Tom.
And we use this to kill off one of our favorite
Oh,
characters.
no! Spoiler. But
Spoiler,
We want to
spoiler.
fun. We want no. So what Tom just said, so I could rehabilitate the witness, as they say. Yes, one of our main characters may or may not die, and we may or may not tell you, but we won't. And right. So the one of the other things that we have is we thought about how fire starting we call it telepyrotics, so other people call it like other things, is a lot like telekinetics, but instead of moving objects around, you're moving energy. So in order to make something hot, you need to make something cold. And whereas the telekinetic builds up a lot of waste heat in her mind as she's moving things around, the telepyrotic is the opposite because she's like making things cold, including her mind, in order to make other things hot. Because energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it can be moved around. I mean, aside from atomic power, it can be moved around. And so the telepyrotic has the opposite problem, but it's an issue of can you achieve balance so that you don't kill yourself while you're using your psychic powers?
Well, actually, Frank, it's true that you could be cooling the brain and running the risk of freezing it, which would be just as deadly. But the scenes that you're referring to, she actually had the environment right around her getting frosty. A ring of frost on the ground. She moves the energy out of her environment rather than out of her head.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, she learns how to do that. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about your characters. You mentioned a she. So can you tell me about some of your characters?
Which one of us do you want? Like
Frank.
Okay. Well, our favorite character is probably Katrinka, who's got a lot of interesting characteristics. She has mind reading, she has a telekinesis, she also has clairvoyance. So in the same way in the Final Destination movie, there's like hints of like stuff that might happen. There's like visual clues that she gets that she doesn't understand. Like here's a statue falling, or there's a plate falling on the floor full of food. Like, what does that mean? Or a mirror. Like, and all of these things are like little flashes of symbols that she's received from some spiritual power over many years and has no idea what they mean. Because at least in our universe, every time that you have someone that receives psychic visions, you always have someone that interprets it. Like in the Bible, you had Joseph interpreting the visions that other people were having. Like
Pharaoh's dreams.
Pharaoh would see like the seven skinny cows and seven fat cows. And it was Joseph who said, well, that means 7 years of famine and 7 years of not famine. And so one of our other heroes, Gabriel, is put in charge of like trying to figure out what these mean. And he's like never done this before and has no idea, as he's like, as the plot is going along and clues are being revealed as events happen, it's like, oh, well, that's what that meant. And then it all comes to a shattering conclusion that we can't like tell you about.
Well,
But it's really
sometimes-
exciting and really cool. And I think the last third is everything like comes together, and the visions and the telekinesis and the telepyrotics and everything, and the mind reading and the secret weapons and the guns and the explosions and like everything, like yeah. And then
Okay,
blam right at the end. Tom?
Yeah.
Tom.
Some of the things that he realizes always after the fact are a bit of a surprise. Some of them are, oh, that's what that was. There aren't really very many shattering things, although they can add up to this huge sense of surprise.
Okay, so as far as characters go, which point of view is your book written from?
Well, the fun thing about mind reading is that you've already told the audience, okay, well, some characters can read other characters' thoughts and stuff. And meanwhile, one of the things that you learn as a writer is that, third person omniscient, when you like say what your characters are thinking, it's not really a good way to write. And it's like, well, we kind of broke that rule anyway. So it's like, I mean, we've already trained the reader to be comfortable like getting in and out of like characters' heads as they do stuff. It's like, well, he said this, but really, he meant that. What does that mean?
This is
He's
this
a
has been one
villain
of
and
the
he has secret
interesting
motivations.
things that we've developed. You can have a scene from one person's point of view, but that one person can tell what the others are thinking.
Yeah.
So it's like the omniscient narrator, but it isn't really.
Clever.
Yeah, we did. Well, here we have a slight difference of opinion because of the parts that Tom wrote and parts that I wrote. Because I really just tell the reader this is what he was thinking, and it's not what he said at all. And I hope the reader just kind of goes along with it. And if they don't, well, we'll get a bad comment in Goodreads, but oh well, there you go. Oh well, what can you do? Someone's not gonna like something. And it's like, if that's the one line they didn't like, I can live with that.
So
That's
when
fine.
you were, excuse me, when you were writing together, did you outline the story first, or did you just kind of let it go where it went?
That's an interesting question because we didn't really do either one.
Oh,
We wrote modules and then threw them at the other guy and said, here, see if you can make this fit.
Well, we had originally thought of this as like a story collection, like the Martian Chronicles, which is still one of my favorite books and one of the very first books I ever read, which doesn't have one main character that goes from page one to the last page, but is a whole bunch of little characters that and like you see something like that in the book about D-Day, The Longest Day, where I think it was Cornelius Ryan who wrote that. But he interviewed like basically everyone he could find that was still alive. And so this part of the invasion is like told from like these different characters who never appear again in the book, but the overall theme carries through. And so Tom had originally written these basically short stories that were linked. And as I was reading them, trying to make them think about like book rather than story, it became really clear that like we needed something to tie everything together more clearly. And so I came in, I beefed up the villain a bunch and give him a backstory and all these miscellaneous characters who were doing bad things. Like suddenly knew each other and suddenly were getting orders from the same place. And in order to like have like, one Darth Vader that walks through, and it's like, yeah, maybe the stormtroopers are doing bad things, but they're all getting orders from Darth Vader or, whatever, to kind of like give the reader some guide to like what was going on.
Well, we built some of that as we went along. One of the things that we have by the end, and that we use in the sequels, is that these psychics are centered as a CIA black operation in a classy French restaurant in Washington, D.C. They didn't have that at the beginning of this first novel. But as they gathered together in this mission to fight the assassins, they eventually coalesced. One of the characters is managing the restaurant, and so everybody gathers in that particular setting. So it continues after that.
Do either of you, are there times when you disagree on things?
Yes.
How do you manage that?
No, we never disagreed on anything. No,
How do
never.
you manage that?
No.
Go back and forth, go back and forth.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
a lot of back and forth. So Tom, as you mentioned, tends to write really thin, and I tend to write really thick. So there would be things sketched in, and then I'd go in and do what I call set decoration, where I like flesh out the backstories and add like funny dialogue and add like bits here and there, and to make it more the way that I would want it to be. And then Tom will come and say, no, 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 and he trims some of that stuff back. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And I put it back, and then eventually Tom would give up because I'd keep putting back the things that he was cutting out, and eventually like I'd like knuckle him down, and it's like, no, this needs to go in, this needs to stay in. And of course I'm sure Tom has a completely different perspective on this.
Okay.
It helps that we can stay friendly.
Yeah, it does help that. I mean, it does actually help that like again, like as Tom mentioned, like he lives like half a mile away, so he walks by my house like all the time walking his dog. So he's like, hey, hey, by the way, that one page that we were fighting about, it's like, what about this? And
Okay. Oh, sorry.
yeah, so and there's certainly been a lot of like back and forth as we're writing book 2. Because it's like, no, you can't do that. That's inconsistent with what we said in book 1. It's like, oh no, I found some other inconsistencies in book 1 that no one noticed. That none of the readers noticed, that we didn't notice, but like one character has 2 different first names. Well, maybe we'll glue that together and retcon it in the second book by giving him 2 first names. Yes.
Well,
that's it.
Or have people refer to them. I think the way we had it so far is somebody refers to him once using both of them, first and middle. And
right, exactly, yeah.
First.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, you've heard this story a million times, Selena. The author finishes the book, it gets published, it gets good reviews, he opens it to a random page. Oh my God, that's a typo.
Yep.
The typo that never dies. In this case, it was, we have this guy with 2 names.
Now he's got for real 2 names.
Yeah.
Which is the way we planned it all along.
Of course.
Did
you have an editor? Did you have somebody else edit it, or did you edit it yourself?
No.
Mostly, well, until we connected up with Amazing Stories, they had a copy editor who, well, I'm not going to say anything bad about him, but we did much more editing than he did. Okay. I've been writing science fiction, nonfiction, textbooks for more than 50 years. I started back in the 70s. And I've had a pretty good reputation all that time for writing pretty clean copy. It may have helped that for a while back in the 70s, I was actually a textbook editor with Scott Forsman out in Illinois. And one of the things that you had to do in order to function in that job was to swallow the Chicago Manual of Style whole. And when I was about 6, I was reading dictionaries. So all of that helps. And I do try to write clean copy. And when we go over and over and over the stuff, we both look for every place where we are being clumsy or vague or sometimes bad punctuation even, and we try to fix it. But as with those names, it's impossible to catch it all.
And we have a million characters. We have a lot of characters in these books.
Well,
You have a lot of characters.
Yeah.
Some of them are just incidental, some of them are just there to get killed off, but
Because that's always fun. I mean, if you're gonna do spies, like people have to die, or else it's not really fun unless people die. I mean, like, no, I mean, like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be flippant about about people dying, like all the horrible things happening in the war. But it's like, it's like it's like a tightrope. It's like in like spy novels and adventure and actiony things, like people die and that's exciting, but it's also like, oh shit, like people died. Fuck. I mean, it's heart-wrenching in places too because people die. And I wanted to make sure that every single person who we killed off in the novel at least got a name. And we learned at least like one thing about them, like what they were doing or what the whatever. And because I hate it when characters just like are killed off willy-nilly and there's no repercussion. It's like, that's a human being. His life was just kind of snuffed out.
Did you? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Did you create the characters before you really came up with the story?
it was pretty simultaneous.
I'm sorry, it was.
It goes together. You have the idea for the story, then you start creating the characters that fit with what's going on, or the kind of people that you need to advance the story. But one of the things that as we move into volume 2 and volume 3, we've got an awful lot of the characters, all of those psychics centered around the restaurant, and those have already been created. All we have to do is to remind the reader of who they are, and then we kind of carry on with the new story.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out Espionage?
Oh, putting it together initially was a whole lot of fun. Writing is fun, and having written is fun, to the point where anybody with their first novel is feeling a kind of walk on air good. I did that a long time ago. This is Frank's first novel, so I think he's still 6 inches off the ground. But challenges, it actually turned out to be fairly easy to find the publisher. Trying to get some publicity going, all of that. We're very fortunate to have met you at Boston, I think. We've managed to get some good reviews. And trying to get the word out is one of the very, very difficult things these days. When I started, there were many more publishers. Now you have the indie route, which has replaced what we used to call vanity publishing. Of course, some of it still is vanity. But so the indie route, people have found out that what the publishers used to do, now it's up to them. They have to hire copy editors, and there are some good ones out there. They have to hire artists to do covers. They have to do publicity. Although with publicity, let's be honest, publishers said they would take care of the promotion, but they were never anywhere near as good about it as the authors wanted them to be, unless you were a bestseller.
Yeah.
What else is challenging, Frank?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's two aspects. There's the writing, and then there's the publishing. Okay, three aspects. And then the publicity. And I do have to say that when I was walking around in the convention with the book hat, there were people that said, "I will buy a copy of the book, but only because you're wearing a book hat." I'm like, yes, that is exactly. That is, I mean, so the book hat idea actually comes from like literally 2 decades ago. Ken Wharton had a book called Divine Intervention, his first novel. And we went around in the dealer's room and like holding the book up like this, like against our foreheads. And he said, book hat. I'm like, yes. So it took 2 decades, but finally we have book hat. But anyway, but
It's
the
a great
point
idea.
is that like trying to find interesting, fun ways to promote your book without like, I don't know, taking it all too seriously. And because this is hard, everything is writing is hard, finding a publisher is hard, publicity is hard. So anything that you can do that can make it kind of fun and weird and out of the ordinary and stuff like that is that's a good thing.
Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about your book, Frank? Frank first.
Well, I did mention that there's like explosions and guns and spies and mind reading and telepyronics and code breaking and like secret weapons and like Russians doing shit. And I can swear, right? Well, it's too late now. And all sorts of like crazy stuff happening. And so the book itself, there's a lot of different things. It's I think it's fun to read. It moves along really quickly. I hate things. I hate reading things where it's like page after page goes by and nothing happens, or nothing consequential happens, or it's like, come on, give me some plot here. And so there's a lot of plot. There's a lot of stuff that happens. So I mean, this is people say that you should read a book that you would want to you should write a book that you would want to read, and this is the kind of book that I would want to read.
Great. Okay, Tom.
Well, we do have some elements in this thing, the whole political thing. We also have one rainbow character. I've been hoping ever since it came out that somebody would decide that it had to be banned.
Oh,
That,
I love that.
Well, maybe we
That's
should
great.
mail copies to Ron DeSantis because he wants to ban everything. And there's a
That's
whole bunch
great.
of Republicans that yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great publicity. It's like, ban our book. Hey, anybody out there that doesn't want, doesn't like any of this stuff, or
That's
think the
great.
psychics are unbiblical or whatever. Yeah, go ahead and ban our book. I dare you. Come on, do it.
Okay.
Ban
Okay.
it. Ban it. Ban it.
Okay, my next question I'm going to ask each of you individually. Tom, what's your favorite part about being a writer?
Oh, there are a few. As I said before, having written is the great joy. It's fun to write, but having it all done and out and in your hands, wow. But over the years, the one thing that was a real kick was 10 years worth of option money for my old Organic Future books. They came out from Ace Books back in the early 90s. And one of the producers for the original Beetlejuice movie Saw a short story in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction that they gave the cover to and called me up and said, "Do you have any more like this?" And okay, they never made the movie. And I'm told that 99% of the time they don't, but they kept sending me free money.
That's
Oh,
that's like every writer's dream.
Yeah. For the
that's
movies, the
fantastic. Fantastic. Frank?
Best thing about writing.
Yep. What's your favorite part about
Well,
being a
people
writer?
say that. What was that, Tom? Oh,
Hmm?
people say that you should only write what you know, and I take that as an excuse to go and know a bunch of stuff that I don't know. So,
Ah, I like that.
so like one of the things is we have like a camera with a gun hidden inside. And like, how would that actually work? So I got to do all this research on like miniature guns and how would you actually do that? And what is actually on the inside of a camera? And what can you get rid of and still have it like look like a camera and maybe function like a camera? And stuff like that, which is just really great.
No, and obviously, if you're going to hide a gun in it, you're not talking about the camera on your iPhone. You're talking about something with a big projecting lens on it.
Yeah, exactly. And you get something like what's called a pepper box gun, which is basically a tube. It doesn't have the revolving thing with the bullets. It doesn't have a oh God. See, that's the thing. It's like you learn stuff and you use it and you completely forget afterwards with all the special terminology.
So
Uh,
we've got trained memories, though, Selena. I mean, Frank has a doctorate in bacterial genetics. My own is in theoretical biology. I've always figured the theoretical part gives me a license to write science fiction.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So, Tom, what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Oh, it's been quite a long time since I gave con talks on this or wrote articles on about it. But back in the 80s, I was a source for the National Enquirer. One of their editors called up Stanley Schmidt at Analog to say, "We need a biologist." And Stan said, "You should talk to Tom." And away we went. They would spend a little time on the phone with me, and a couple of weeks later, I'd get a check.
Nice.
All I had to do was to talk through that big writer's hole in the top of my hat.
Oh, wow.
It was an adventure. It was fun.
Okay.
And they liked it because I was one of the few academics who would actually talk to them.
Interesting. Yeah. I I can see that they would have a hard time finding an academic to talk to them.
Yeah, I can imagine that too.
Frank, what was your favorite adventure during
Favorite
your
adventure?
career?
Finding someone who'll actually publish my stuff. So, I've had a lot of luck with Analog Magazine, which is the premier hard science fiction magazine. And so it's like if you're gonna get published in there, you gotta know some science and you gotta get the science right, or at least believable, even if it's fanciful. And so I'm very proud of being part of what they call the Mafia, which is multiple appearances of fiction and analog. And so I've had 6 things in analog so far, including 2 novellas. And um, and 3 of those things have either one's a finalist for the Analab Award, which is the best story as voted by the readers of Analog. So I'm very proud to have a 50% batting average in Analog. And so is that my favorite moment? I don't know. It's my proudest
Nice.
achievement in
Well,
writing.
that's
I
good.
have like the thing to have the thing not just published in analog, but to have the thing that the readers thought was the best in analog is really kind of special. And
It's gratifying.
writing is hard. Writing is hard, and it's like you take your any positive energy that you can get from anywhere. And yeah, that helps keep me going. Like it's like, well, some people like it, like what I'm doing. So
Yeah, that's wonderful.
yeah.
The
Okay.
analog mafia is a term that's been around for a while, and Frank qualifies. I've spent 30 years as their book columnist, 300 columns over that length of time, plus stories and articles. So I just don't bother mentioning it myself. Frequent appearance.
That's an accomplishment. Wow.
But I retired from that in 2008. After that long a gig, it gets old.
Yeah.
After 300 of them, I would think so.
Yes.
Okay, Tom, what's the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
Well, when I first started out, I thought that it would be awfully nice to be able to write the way Robert Silverberg did. He turned stuff out at a ferocious pace. I soon learned, and here's the greatest thing I've learned, that no, he can do it. Almost nobody else can. What you have to do is learn that you don't have to write fast, but you have to be able to keep it up. Write slowly, but don't stop. And you'll hear people asking you, how long does it take to write a book? It seems like so much work. And you say, if you just write a page a day, you're done in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes I just say it's like a baby. It takes 9 months.
Interesting. Is there any other piece of advice you'd like to share with other writers?
Don't stop. Don't be afraid to collaborate.
Makes perfect sense. Yep.
One piece of advice I'd like to share with other writers or would-be writers is don't take anybody's advice. And no, seriously, because it's like you have all these people, like you have Heinlein, who wrote some of the great science fiction novels like Starship Troopers and Stranger in a Strange Land and I Will Fear No Evil, etc., etc. And he says stuff like, don't rewrite unless you're getting paid to rewrite, which is great advice unless it's really bad advice. And in my case, it's really bad advice because my first drafts are terrible, like really bad, like full of typos, and the wording is janky, and like the characters suck and everything is terrible. And it's just really, really bad. And so some of these things I got published in analog are like literally the last thing we submitted was version 64. But it's not like version 64, but it's like, but in order to get from 1 to 64, we went to like 1, 1.1, 1.2, 2, 2.1, etc. And so it's like rewriting and rewrite. And so some writers are like, okay, how many words did you write today? Oh, I wrote 500 words. I wrote 1,000 words. That's meaningless to me. It's more like, how many words did you rewrite so that you don't throw up when you read what you wrote like a week ago because it's so awful. And it's like, but that's not true about everybody. And it's like you get these lessons again from the Bible, like love your neighbor. Well, that's great, but there's a spectrum of people. There's people that hate their neighbor, and like, yes, you should love their neighbor more. But then you have people on the opposite end who spend too much time loving their neighbor, and so they neglect their own needs. And it's like, that person does not need to hear love your neighbor. But it's like blanket advice that is good for like 70% of people. But maybe you're in that 30% that doesn't. And it's like, okay, some people are told like writing is like just spending lots and lots of time writing. well, maybe that's good advice, maybe it's not. Maybe you should spend more time reading.
Hmm.
Maybe you should spend more time thinking about what you're going to write before you write, or maybe you don't need to. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what you as a you just go write, just go make up stuff and string words together. And if you like it, great. If you don't like it, make it so that you like it. That's the
Well,
only advice I'll give you. And you guys figure it out like how you're gonna do that, because I can't tell you, because anything I tell you is gonna be pointless and you gotta figure it out yourself. So my
well,
advice is that I'm not giving you any advice.
you are in a way, Frank, because one of the old truisms in the field is that writing is half writing and half revising. And I've
Oh,
seen
I
it.
wish, I wish that were true.
Well,
No, for
okay,
me,
maybe it's more revising.
it's like
I've seen it said,
95% rewriting.
but
Yeah,
I've seen it said many times that the trick is to get something down on paper, no matter how bad it is,
yeah,
that
yeah.
you can then work on changing it, improving it. The other piece of advice that I think should apply to everybody in the field, every beginner, no, you don't go take courses. You don't go do workshops. You sit down and start typing.
Actually, I don't know
Mhm.
about that, because I learned a lot about writing from going to science fiction conventions, which are not exactly workshops, but it's like you hear writers like talking about writing. And it's like, so once somebody once said in a convention, like, for me, good writing is all about controlling the pace, which is not something I'd ever thought about. And now I think about it like all the time. Are things moving along too fast? Do you need to slow down so that the emotions like have time to seep in and you can really experience the angst, or whatever? Or do things need to just like bam, and then they were shot and they fell down and they were like fell down the hill and then that exploded and then the car came and they shot that, and it's like whatever. And it's like yeah, I'd never thought about that pacing. But
Hmm.
and it's like you
Okay.
as everybody as a writer will think about different things. Like one piece of advice that works well for me, and again, it's like your mileage may vary, is everything should have an emotional color to it, because big part of reading stories is teaching people how to use these complicated things called emotions. And as your every paragraph, what is the feeling that you are trying to elicit in your reader? And I get accused every once in a while of doing things that are a little bit dry, a little bit historical, because I'm trying to convey all this information. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot that lesson that I had told myself over and over again, which is, and do I want the reader to think this is fun, or do I want the reader to be sad? And sometimes I'll like play sad music while I'm writing, so that like, and if there are no tears in the writer, there's no tears in the reader, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's another thing. Like, what emotion at with every sentence, what emotion are you trying to get the reader to feel?
Hmm. Yeah, you just mentioned music when you're writing. When you're writing, do you always need music, or do you like to write in silence? Or and if you're using music, what kind of music do you always go to with the emotions of what you're
Well,
writing?
it depends. Um, I've been listening to Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue by Crystal Gale on repeat, because it's got this kind of nice lilting, and for me it's like so hard to get like the first draft out, and so to have that sort of like, okay, we'll just slowly write and we'll get the words out, and the song is kind of sad, but it's also kind of like it, it's got that like flow to it, which a lot of my first drafts don't. So I'm trying to like, I used to paint a lot, but my eyes have gotten bad, so I don't paint much anymore. But painting is really like capturing the rhythm of your hand in colors on canvas in a physical, it's like translating dance into a physical object. And writing is kind of like that too. So another song that I listen to a lot is the Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp by George Harrison, which is on the All Things Must Pass album, which again is this sort of like lilting lullaby. Um, and that helps, like, yeah,
Okay.
helps
Tom, what
me
about you?
walk up and like,
I'm happy with silence around me. I always have been. I have a better excuse for it now because I have to have hearing aids. I'm hard of hearing. You get old enough, that's one of the things that goes. But Frank
Hmm.
wants the rhythms and tempos of the music to influence the writing. He talks of the emotional color, but he's an artist, so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what do I have for an equivalent of that? Obviously, I have to put emotional freight in there in some fashion, but I'm usually concentrating on what am I trying to say. And I'm a longtime college professor, so I have a tendency to lecture. You may even have heard some snippets of that in this interview. But I try to, make the characters play off against each other, or events play off against each other. He thinks in terms of music. I suppose I would think more in terms of ping pong, which is actually a game once upon a time I would play from time to time. But back and forth, keep the ball in play.
and ping pong has a particular rhythm too.
Yeah.
And yeah, because there's there's a musicality to ping pong, especially when it's really fast ping pong, and you get the people who are standing like 10 feet back from the table and they're like wham, 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 wham. It's like, wow,
True.
that's kind of cool. But, so
So-
the other thing that I wanted to add was that like some people like to enter in like a different physiological, mental state when they're writing their first draft. It's like I've met writers who are like, I always get drunk before I write a first draft, or I always have beers, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I think what they're getting at is that it like loosens the inhibitions because it's hard to get the words from your brain to into the screen, and but by drinking or taking pot or like whatever, like these people, that's not something I do, but I think the thing is that it allows them also to experience the feelings that they're trying to feel more intensely so that they can capture it. But when they edit and rewrite, it's like write drunk and then rewrite sober, so you can find all the typos.
That's an advice that I have heard before too. I do half my writing when I'm taking a nap or when I'm walking the dog. I just let the brain freewheel. And then I come back, sit down, and get it down.
Interesting. Okay.
Connie Willis used to think about stories and plot and everything while she was doing house chores. And then yeah. I mean, I think if I did that, I'm kind of clumsy. I'd probably chop off all my fingers. Cutting vegetables is like, why is my hand all bloody?
So Tom, you just mentioned you were walking the dog. So I was going to ask you if you read that writers have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help or hinder them with their work, and obviously you have one. Does it help or hinder you?
We have one Quaker parakeet, one budgie, one greyhound, and a cat.
Oh,
And
wow.
the cat lives upstairs, which is where my office is, and I very occasionally have to very brutally shove her aside. The dog will occasionally feel neglected and start whining downstairs, but I can ignore that until it's time for a walk. And in fact, when we're done with this interview, it's going to be time for her walk. She'll be lobbying for it. And I'll go walk off a mile and a half, go past Frank's house. If he's outside, we'll say hello and say something about, gee, that interview went well.
Yeah.
Or not.
And Frank, I see you have something in your lap.
This is Kablam. He's a
Who is that?
Bichon, and he like hangs out at my feet all day. And we just got a puppy who, thank God, is sleeping and not barking nonstop during this interview because he's lively to be doing. Hopefully, if anybody heard any like weird like crunching and munching sounds, that was kaiju, named after the Japanese word for giant monster. Kaiju, his full name is Daikaiju, obviously. Yeah, he is like busy chewing up the entire house, like literally chewing up the entire house. But
Okay.
I'm
So does he hinder you or help you with your work?
both.
Yep, that's usually the answer.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. I just have two more questions for you now.
Sure.
Okay, Tom, let's ask you this first. Actually, it's for both of you, really. So where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I'm going to give a plug for Annie's. You can get espionage and your works at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613.
What was that
or
number?
508-796-5613, or
Call
you can,
now. Operator standing by.
You need a banner to hold up there over the screen.
yes, I should have I should have a sign up here saying that, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else can people find your book?
Well, I was looking up Annie's Book Nook, and I noticed that there's book nooks in several states.
Actually, Annie's used to be a franchise.
Okay.
And it's no longer a franchise. They're all independent bookstores, and they have nothing to do with each other, really. And so there used to be a lot of them all over, and now there's only like 5 or 6 left. Anyways, but again, they're all independent.
Okay.
And we have many different things in our store. We have used books, we have new books, we have audio books, all kinds of things. We have a lot of Doctor Who things.
If somebody knows what they want, you can get it for them.
Yes, exactly.
Well, the place to get this one book, certainly. You can go to Amazing and order it there. You can go to Amazon. You can go to Barnes and Noble. They have it. And there are undoubtedly other places as well. If you want our other books, well, as I said, this is Frank's first novel. It's my 16th. Plus, I've had another 50 books, fiction, nonfiction, whatnot. One of the nonfiction books that came out a while ago from B Cube Press was Destinies, Issues to Shape Our Future. That was 2020. I'm pretty sure you don't have it, but if somebody came asking for it, of course.
Yeah, we could probably get it.
Other novels, the Organic Future novels about a future dealing with an awful lot of genetic engineering in it. That material came out in the early 90s. There were 5 novels. And there were a bunch of others. Most of it science fiction, some of it fantasy. I don't think I've done much in the way of horror. Although some people were horrified at what they were reading.
Well, maybe you should sit down and write some horror, but only if you wish it.
Well, people can always go to the International Science Fiction Database and look people up.
Right.
That is
So,
really right.
So my next question, which kind of relates to that, is how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Well, we're both on Facebook. We're
Okay.
both on Blue Sky. I think, Frank, you still pay attention to Twitter or
That which was
what-
formerly known as Twitter. Yeah. Yeah. I'm still on Twitter. You
you're
can
on
go
TikTok.
to frankwu.com. I have my own .com where you can see some of my art and like read some of the stuff that I've had in analog. And yeah, those are the main obvious places.
Okay.
But I do want to make a plug for bookstores, Annie's, and bookstores in general, because they're just great places to make new friends, both physical friends, like find out new books, and like actually talk to people that also like books and know some stuff that you might enjoy.
You mentioned your frankwu.com. I suppose I should mention the website that I share with Judith Klein-Dial, that's jandtbooks.com. And there is a display of the anthologies Judith and I have done, as well as a blog where the occasional short story gets posted or an announcement about a novel or whatever. The anthologies you might actually want in your store if you haven't seen them. These are from Ian Randall Strock's fantastic books. The first one was Science Fiction for the Throne, One Sitting Reads. And it's exactly what it sounds like. We've always thought that if we did a sequel to it, it should just have a big number 2 on the cover. Then we did Fantasy for the Throne and Horror for the Throne, which will scare the something out of you. And those anthologies consisted each of 40 stories under 2,000 words. 40 stories under 2,000 words, all reprints, which makes it easy to put the book together. And the stories are short enough to be one sitting reads. That's all it is.
Great. That's great. Well, that's actually all the questions I have for you. Thank you guys so much for this interview. It was wonderful.
It's a pleasure
And
having us. It's really appreciate it. It's really fun.
yeah, perhaps maybe sometime soon we can get you over to the store and have a signing.
Oh, I'd love that.
Worcester's not too far from Dedham. It would
That's
take us, what, about 40 minutes to drive out there, Frank?
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad at all. That'd
Something
be
like
fun.
that.
So
Well,
we could do a road trip some weekend.
let's talk
Okay,
about that then. Okay, thank you very much, Frank Wu, Tom
Thank you.
Easton. We will be talking to you.